Look, I think the thing that I say to any founder is like your revenue, your growth says more than anything, right? And I think often in the VC landscape, VCs want to back what they call great founders. And I always thought that I was a great founder. I was gritty, I was driven, I was a builder. But what a great founder actually means, what it really means is you have worked everything out and you are growing like crazy. That's actually what it means. So if you've not got everything worked out and you're growing like crazy, you're not yet a great founder.
This is Melanie.
And this is Christian.
You're listening to Follow the Gradient, the weekly podcast with actionable insights about how to build a business while staying sane. Welcome back to another episode of Follow the Gradient. Today's guest is not your typical founder. Sabba Keynejad didn't study computer science, he went to art school instead. He also didn't come from a unicorn mafia, he taught himself to code on YouTube. He didn't raise millions early, he bootstrapped his company by taking on contract work and pouring every paycheck back into the product, until Sequoia came knocking, but that's another story. He cycled to a co-working space at 7 a.m., split entry cards with his co-founders to just afford the fee, lived on discounted food, and sold his crypto just to keep the lights on. And still, after being rejected by YC twice in just one weekend, he got up the next day and kept building. And yes, it was hard. Truly hard. But Sabba had one rule: only work on what makes the boat go faster. Today, he's the co-founder and CEO of VEED, an AI-powered video editing platform with over 10 million monthly users and more than 40 million in ARR. The product? It's simple. And that's exactly the point. Sabba's obsession has always been clarity for users, for creators, and for his team. In this conversation, Christian, Sabba, and I go deep into how he scaled a global company from London, how dyslexia shaped his product mindset, and why talking to users isn't just a tactic, it's really an act of love. And yes, as a Swiss host, I should defend the Swiss Army knife. But Sabba has a point here. It's better in your backpack than in your product roadmap. But hear it for yourself. Now, before we kick off, a quick personal message from us. We do this podcast as a side hustle to help founders navigate the craziness of startup life. If you find it valuable, don't just listen. Subscribe to our free newsletter at followthegradient.io. We send it twice a week straight to your inbox. Every Tuesday morning, we break down the latest tech and startup news in Europe, share food for thought you won't get anywhere else, highlight open positions at top European startups, and of course, drop one meme that says it all. Every Thursday morning, we share exclusive insights from our podcast guests, the things they didn't say on air, but you definitely don't want to miss. And now, without further ado, let's dive into the conversation with Sabba. Welcome to the show, Sabba. So great to have you here. So, Sabba, you and Tim launched VEED in 2018 with no money, no validation, no funding. And as I've learned by thrifting through some of your interviews, for a long stretch, it was just pure hustle, cycling to a co-working space at 7 a.m., splitting entry cards so that you can even afford the so-called co-working space, begging for discounts, living on discounted food, even selling crypto to keep the lights on. At the same time, at one point, you had a 60% month-over-month growth. You applied to IC and they said no twice over the course of a weekend. What did that rejection really feel like and how did you bounce back?
Wow, you really did your research. As you say it, you're bringing up some really bad memories, actually.
But you learned a lot from them, no?
Yeah, it was a really tough time. Really, really tough time. You know, starting a company is one of the hardest things I've ever done. And when you're going through a period of time, which for us was about 2.5 years, where you're pushing a boulder up a hill and no one is helping you along the way, it's a really dark place to be. I had a lot of emotions expressed in different ways. I remember being addicted to a cycling bike that I'd go to every day to kind of try and regulate my mental health. And yeah, it was just really hard, just frankly, really, really tough. But we got there. We got there.
And you're still here, more successful than ever. And we will come to also that point of the story. But it seems like you don't get there without kind of grinding at the beginning of it. But also at the time, the UK startup capital was a lot thinner than it was for founders in the Valley. you'd already been rejected before YC by dozens of VCs and yet still managed to grind it through. So maybe let's talk about the UK startup funding scene. What were the most frustrating limitations you hit building a global SaaS business from here? And also, like, compared to today, what can founders being in the similar situation, also in be it at the beginning or in the middle of fundraising, what can they learn from it?
Yeah, I mean, the funding landscape has changed so much in Europe in the last 10 years. When we were first starting the company, it was probably 2018. And back then there was some early stage funds. So Seed Camp was definitely, here in the UK. But all the attention was very much in the Valley. The risk appetite in the Valley was always much higher than the UK. But I kind of just got on with it, right? Like I didn't really consider moving to California. I wanted to stay in London. It kind of just felt like this is a good city and it's a good place to do it. Now the funding landscape here in Europe is like, come on, leaps and bounds. Sequoia, our investor, is based here in London with a lovely office in Marylebone. They've got a great team, and so many other funds have also like built presences out of Europe now. So the landscape has changed a lot, and I think it's a great thing. And it's interesting what we've seen in the last 5 years, and COVID might have been a catalyst for this, but there's a lot of really big companies that are also staying here, right? So in the space that we operate in, which is like audio, video, you've got some incredible companies in London, like 11 Labs, for example, past 100 million in revenue, 3 billion valuation at the last funding round. Synthesia, pretty much exactly the same, so like it's incredible to see. And I think what we're going to see from that is a few more, hopefully, generations of paying it forward with founders basically putting back into the ecosystem. So it's an exciting time for venture in Europe and also building startups in Europe. And I think it's only going to go up and to the right.
It sounds as if this would also have given you kind of an edge in certain sense of, although you had to really earn it. So do you think you'd build differently if you were starting out in San Francisco back then?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, 100%. I think there's, I've been thinking about this. I think that if we were, look, there's a lot of things here, right? So I do think that if we're based in San Francisco, we probably would have got funding sooner. We would have got the company running sooner. I think we would have had a very different business model if we were started in the Valley. I think we would have been a lot more free for a longer time because it would be supported by venture, basically. And that also has like an impact on your growth. I was listening to a podcast the other day with Dylan Field from Figma, and their product was free for they didn't charge for it for like 7 years from the initial funding. And that meant that they could get loads of users using it. It meant they could build a great product before they even need to charge, right? For us, it was the complete opposite. We had to charge on day one because I had rent to pay, right? I had to, yeah. So like, because of that, we've had to monetize a lot earlier, and there's benefits to that too, right? We've built a really sustainable business. We're now, around 50 million in revenue, but we've only ever done one funding round in our entire life, which is, incredible, actually. We've only got one board member. So, there's a lot of benefits to it. And we own the vast majority of the company, the employees and the founders. So I think every cloud has a silver lining. And yeah, I would just say to anyone who's, as I said, the landscape is changing every day quite a lot, but I think it's easier than ever to build without funding right now. And I would recommend people try and get their companies off the ground and get that initial traction before you go into those conversations.
And what is, looking back, your biggest learning or your biggest takeaway from these early scrappy years, right? Because you, as you said, you basically bootstrapped to 7 million ARR before Sequoia then came in. You had to do a lot of trade-offs in the beginning. You built features yourself, and you also kept working on contract gigs just to kind of keep the business going. What's, looking back, what's your biggest learning? Maybe positive, but maybe also negative. How do you look upon that period?
I would be lying if I said that I, over those 2 years, built even longer than that, built a allergy to the VC industry and actually kind of decided in a way that they were the evil people to use that energy to drive me to prove everyone wrong, right? So that was actually quite helpful. In terms of like how we built the products though, we became very data driven very early on. A lot of our features was actually built specifically based on search demand, right? The more people that are searching for trim video versus crop video, that would inform our roadmap. Just for one example. So we just got quite good early on at like monetizing basically and understanding what drove revenue and what drove efficient growth and traffic. So even today, we're a very disciplined company, right? Like we're pretty much profitable at this moment in time. You know, we've been growing very nicely over the last few years. So I don't know. I feel like we've just built a healthy company because of it. And we haven't got used to spending lots and lots of money on lovely, shiny things and, you know, all of that good stuff. So I think we've just kind of like built our own journey, right? Built our own path and got on with it. And it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun. Hard, but fun.
It does sound like it. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you talked about one motivation is obviously to prove everybody wrong. If you get these rejections, how do you look upon this in terms of the main reasons for being rejected by the VCs? And would you say you've overcome them, or have you simply pivoted to somewhere else and now actually you pitch to your customers or users as something else than what you back then told the VCs and where they rejected you?
Look, I think the thing that I say to any founder is like your revenue, your growth says more than anything, right? And I think often in the VC landscape, the VCs want to back what they call great founders. And I always thought that I was a great founder. I was gritty, I was driven, I was a builder. But what a great founder actually means, what it really means is you have worked everything out and you are growing like crazy. That's actually what it means. So if you've not got everything worked out and you're growing like crazy, you're not yet a great founder. So I think that's what it is. And I think for my, you know, myself specifically, I was an art school graduate. I never worked in big tech. I never had any fancy jobs at Meta or, you know, Netflix or whatever. So I'm not your, you know, typical ICP that an investor wants to back either. I, you know, didn't work at Palantir. So I'm different. I'm not the normal ICP of a venture-backed startup founder.
They always want to support the outliers. So you match that criteria, no?
Well, maybe I do now.
Well, but you don't wear Patagonia, right?
I've got a few gilets in the cupboard, don't worry.
Inside jokes. Sorry, I interrupted you. You wanted to finish your sentence.
No, I think we've taken this conversation to exactly where it needs to go. I don't have any Patagonia. In fact, that's a complete lie. I'm wearing Patagonia shorts right now.
Yeah. Well, I think nowadays it's more like Carhartt, but yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I think so.
Wow, workwear has really got a new aesthetic, isn't it? That's incredible. I do have a Sequoia Carhartt hat, actually, so you might be right.
You know? Yeah, this is where it's coming. So maybe going back before you had all these fancy clothes, after rejection, you were really straightforward looking into one metric. And this was, as you said, growth, traffic, revenue, week over week. And that kind of brute force mindset worked. At one point, it then kind of started to grow, like from 0 to 1 million in a year and then compounding from there. But it seems that the method wasn't just like hustling, as you said, it was really hands-on. And you said that you talked a lot to users. And I know that in a very particular way, but everyone is saying talk to users and then like the rest will follow. So what's something surprising that you learned from those raw conversations that changed your roadmap? And what is it that really made the difference that maybe others haven't figured out yet?
So there's a few things to unpack there. To just give you an idea of my mentality around growth, I would look at the website traffic every day. And my goal is to make sure the website traffic today is higher than it was yesterday. And so if I had 1,000 people come to the website on a Tuesday and it looks like on Wednesday it'll be about 1,002, I would literally go and like write Reddit posts on Hacker News. I would literally do these little things every day that could increase the traffic. So there's this book that I haven't read, but the title said it all, right? And it's like, only do the things that make the boat go faster. So I would only ever work on things that would make traffic go up. That's it. That was my mentality. And then to your second point around speaking to users and what that actually means, this is a phrase that is thrown around a lot. And I think, as you said, it means something to different people. And like I said, I felt, angry towards the venture system for not giving me money. But on the other side of that, I felt this absolute love and gratitude to our users because they were paying our bills. They were growing the company for us. So I absolutely just literally loved the user. And I ingrained into the company that like our love and appreciation for our users is like on another level. They are paying our salaries. They are voting with their own dollars that this company should exist. And that was such an incredible feeling. And so what did I do to kind of like lean into that? I simply put a automated email. Every person that signed up and paid for VEED, I sent them an email saying, hey, my name is Sabba. I'm CEO and co-founder of VEED. Thank you so much for joining. I'd love to learn more about how you're using the tool. And so every paid user got that email. And after a week, not one person booked a call with me. And so I was like really upset. I was like, I want to talk to you. I love you. Come talk to me. And ironically, I made one very small copy change, and this copy change literally made everyone book calls with me. And I framed it instead from, I want to learn about how you're using VEED to, I will give you a personal onboarding. The founder will onboard you into this tool. Every single person signed up. And so what happened was I had about probably 10 to 12 calls every single day for about a year. And I spoke to hundreds of users. And the reason why it was so important was because I just learned, I would go on a call with someone and I would almost kind of envision and know what they looked like, right? Like their age, their gender. I also knew exactly what they were going to say, what tools they loved and why they loved it, and the pain that it was solving for them. And that single thing just kind of really got me on the same trajectory and mindset of who our users are and what they want. And I was like really embodying that within the company. And it was an incredibly useful thing. I kind of want to go back and do it again now. I'm talking about it. And we are still very much in debt to our user, and we absolutely love them. So that's what it was for us.
Have you, nowadays that the company has grown larger also in terms of employees, have you incorporated that spirit, that mindset somehow into the daily work of the teams?
So we've built a really phenomenal research team at VEED, who is almost like a centralized hub that basically spend, for the size of the company, it's probably larger than most our research team. We do loads of things. We will have all hands and we'll bring our ICPs on to tell us about how they're doing things. We'll go and meet customers who are actually using the product at their offices. We are as customer centric as you can get. However, I would say that we're in a really interesting time right now, especially with AI, where that kind of Henry Ford quote comes up. If you ask these people what they want, they might say a faster horse, but in reality, they want, they don't know what's possible yet. So we're in this really interesting time where we have to also be innovative and imagine and embody them, but also at the same time, have a roadmap that caters for what they want. And one thing that I really wanted to add from the previous question as well on that copy change that I made, and I think this is something that I've really embodied and learned as well as the company's grown, is we can be quite self-serving founders. Like, I want to learn so I can make my product better, right? But actually, you need to offer value to them, right?
I was going to say, right? Because what you basically did is, in the first kind of version of the quote, you kind of said, okay, I want something from you.
Correct.
And what you then did is basically say, I'm going to offer something to you, right? It's entirely different.
Correct. And that single thing, if people take away anything from this, when you are writing copy, you have to offer the thing. It's not about you. It's not what you do. It's not what VEED does. It's what you do for them, right? That's what we do, right? So really important lesson. Sometimes we get it wrong.
Another very important point that many people, founders, like people who know it or seem to know it, say is that product needs to be simple. Now, your product seems to be that simple, but simplicity sounds super easy until you try building for it. How do you protect or have protected that focus as you scaled? How do you really stay simple when every new customer segment wants complexity and an additional feature?
Yeah, so VEED is a really horizontal platform. We sell to a prosumer user. We have about 10 million people use the platform a month. We have about, best part of 200,000 paid users. And because of that, I can't take one request, right? And go and build that, even if it is a, relatively large enterprise customer. So if I hear it 10 times, we should probably build it, right? If I don't, we probably shouldn't. And then, my background, as I said, is in design. Design is so important, right? And I think that the Swiss Army knife. I'm speaking to some Swiss people right now. Actually, you're based in Zurich, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Everyone loves a Swiss Army knife, but it's actually really bad at lots of stuff, right? It's not very good at cutting bread. It's not very good at, cutting meat, right? It's a good gift. It's a good thing to have in your back pocket, right? But actually the bread knife is specifically great at cutting bread. So you don't really want to be a Swiss Army knife either, right? You don't want to do lots of things well. Fine. You want to do a few things really, really well. So we've really kind of worked out what are those outlier product decisions and features that our users really love and actually just works really hard on them. A really good example of this is our, subtitling product, which is, one of the tools that we're really well known for. If one provider goes down, it backs onto another, right? Our transcription technology integrates about 7 different providers that all offer better transcriptions based on the language that the user's, choosing. We spend a lot of time on the very small details with the kerning and the typography to make sure they look incredible. So that's an area where we go deep. Transitions, video transitions, we don't care about as much, right? So some nuances there. And can I also just say, I've done a few podcasts and I know that I'm actually talking to people that build software themselves and are founders because of the questions that you're asking me. And I really appreciate it.
Thanks for the shout out.
Yes. And let's go to the, let's say, early phases of VEED in terms of your growth, because you guys had a pretty insane SEO strategy. I think you had like 500 different landing pages, a ton of YouTube videos. I think you even optimized for AI related traffic. You optimized for Wikipedia rankings. So if you look at your distribution channels, what was, looking back, your most powerful growth lever? What was maybe also the most unexpected one? How did you approach that back in the days?
So yeah, SEO for us has been super powerful. When you charge $20 for a product, you need to get lots and lots of people to use it. And you need to do that in a very cost efficient way. We worked out that 100,000 people a month Googled the word trim video. We then worked out that 20,000 people Googled trim MP4, 10,000 people Googled trim MOV, and that long tail kept going. So we basically made this very, very large content directory around every single thing a person could potentially Google if they wanted to find your tool. That was the initial kind of content directory that we built at VEED, and it was very, very successful. That then scaled internationally into, a bunch of other markets, Spanish, Brazilian, whatever, across the whole world. And then on top of that, we started thinking hey, what are some tools that people who might want to edit videos need? And we're like, video compressor. People that are compressing videos, they're probably sending them, they're probably editors. So we built a video compressor. 500,000 people use that. And we're probably the world's largest video compressor for some strange reason because of that strategy, right? And then how do you, so at the start, we just had this landing page that did video compression. And then we're like, how can we now upsell our product? So we kind of built this strategy that we call exit through the gift shop, where basically you compress your video and then you end up in our editor. So you can see the other tools that we offer. So that was really exciting. And then we thought to ourselves, hey, what's this Google thing's amazing. We're getting so much great traffic from it. What's the second largest search engine in the world? And it turns out that's YouTube. So then we started doing exactly the same thing, how to trim a MOV, how to trim a, MP4, how to trim a video, and made literally YouTube videos for every single search term you could imagine. So our YouTube channel has over 80 million views at this point, and every single one of those views is showing someone how to do something in VEED. And then we'd also do some really sneaky things as well. We would say how to add AI powered subtitles in Canva, right? Canva don't offer AI powered subtitles. So people would be trying to get a job done in Canva and then would just steal that intent, right? And be like, you could do it in Canva, but it's really tough, right? You have to do it, manually. And I can show you this automatic way, right? And so we started doing things like that. And, the first guy we hired in this was, his name was Alec. He's a very, very talented creator. He made a video every single day for a whole year, and that channel absolutely blew up. And still to this day, content, and I'm in our literally London studio now. We've really leaned into that strategy.
I mean, what I'm hearing is basically point one, data, you're data driven, right? If you talk about the for instance, search volumes and you deduct your opinion on that, and then be user centric, what advice would you give founders or people who want to get something off the ground to kind of be close to their customers or to their users. How did you figure that stuff out? Like subtitles in Canva, although they don't exist.
Well, look, I think so. We actually informed our roadmap based on how many people searched for a specific tool. We would basically stack it by the amount of traffic we would get, but then we would also overlay estimates of what cost per click numbers would be, and then use that to kind of work out what the monetary value is as well. So we could basically have a good gauge on how much traffic, but also how much revenue a feature would drive for us. The advice that I would give is get an account for a tool called Ahrefs, which is one of my favorite tools in the entire world, which is basically like a backend on Google. You can see what people are searching, when they're searching, and what volume as well. And then the final thing that I would say on this is I have coined a term with a small group of founders here in London, and I'm known as the guy that says, make something people search for. So Y Combinator famously have the phrase, make something people want. But the problem with making something people want is it's quite hard to work out what they want, right? But if you make something that people search for, you are basically already identifying that there's demand for this thing, and you just need to get in the way of it, right? As simple as that.
How do you position yourself now in the era of AI, right? Because, I mean, the internet is basically being transformed. We're not going to go to a search engine necessarily anymore. We're going to ask a LLM chatbot somewhere, and they're going to give answers, and they may be referenced to something, but we don't necessarily have to visit a website or watch a video. How do you position yourself for that area now?
From a search and traffic perspective?
Yeah, and also from a distribution perspective. I mean, if you look at your website traffic, for instance, do you have reasons to believe it's going to drop? And even if it is that a bad thing?
Okay, a few questions to unpack there. First of all, I think that the way that people use search engines versus LLMs is very different. I will use a large language model to draft an email, to do some spell corrections, to ideate with. But when people are searching for a tool, yes, they can do it in an LLM, but I feel like Google is actually a better place to do that sort of thing. If the result comes out of ChatGPT, it's a better product. But if the result is I actually need to find an end tool, Google is still a great place to do that. That being said, 15% of our traffic is now coming from large language models, which is significant. And we are doing lots of work there to try and, position ourselves better. We found that things like actually having a Wikipedia page is actually a really big thing, right? And backlinks aren't. Social mentions on social media is also really important. So how can you for us, how can you build a product experience that kind of leans into that? So maybe when you download a video, we could just put a bit of copy that says, hey, give us a shout out and we'll give you a like on your video. That's a way that we can start increasing that social mention, right? So the landscape is moving. I don't have a definitive answer yet, but it's obviously stuff that we're looking really deeply at.
I want to a little bit shift the topic and talk about you as a person, also as a not so typical founder, so to say. If we talk about what VCs are looking for, even though they're claiming they're looking for outliers. So you didn't come from engineering or AI. You were a designer. You also used YouTube a lot. How did that outsider perspective help you to build better tools for creators, and what did it teach you how to approach things?
So I went to an art school in London, and when I was there, there's only one thing they really taught me at art school, and I really appreciate them for doing this. They taught me how to teach myself anything. And I think that was a really, really valuable lesson. And actually, for the price that I paid for university, I'll take that for the rest of my life. They make you feel like you can do anything you want. And that's cool. All right, so when I was at university, the whole I can't remember, it's like early 2012 or something like that. I can't even remember. 2015, I don't know. The whole internet, TechCrunch, Silicon Valley thing was in full swing. And I just knew the future was heading in that direction. Very inspired by, Snapchat just came out and this, college kids are doing this thing, and kind of wanted to be part of the club, So I started just watching YouTube videos to learn how to code, and started incorporating like engineering projects into my art school degree. I spent a lot of time doing computer vision projects. So the Xbox Kinect had this camera in it, and you could basically hack it, plug it into your computer, and start doing some interesting things with computer vision. And that's how I got started. There was this programming language called processing, which is a Java-based kind of coding language for artists. And look, I kind of learned programming in the relationship of frame rates and drawing boxes and interacting with your mouse and keyboard. And it wasn't your classic kind of computer science background. So I think when I came to start VEED, I was actually very fortunate that I actually knew what, frame rates were and FFmpeg was and how these things get put together. So, I think it turns out that the founder market fit for building this was actually quite good. And yeah, learned a lot on YouTube.
Yeah. And I think you still can even more today.
Yeah.
When I talk to especially computer scientists, they say like they would be at a completely other place if they had YouTube and all the things that are happening with Cursor and all this kind of coding tools that are available today, where you can teach yourself how to do things. Now, another aspect that I've also learned by listening to a podcast is that you are dyslexic, and that visual thinking kind of also shaped your approach to the product and also the communication. So, question to you, how has that really influenced VEED's design, your leadership style, or even how you hire maybe?
So I'm that annoying person who always sends voice notes. And I just hate writing and I hate reading. That's a lie. I love writing and I love reading. I find it really challenging to do. I consume most of, I hate to admit this, but it's true. I've never finished reading a whole book. Because again, it's just so hard for me. However, I probably consume an audiobook a week, right? So I found ways to solve those problems. And that's also one of the reasons why I built this company, right? Because I wanted an easy way to create media and tell stories and communicate. And this is the way that I found to be the most powerful way to communicate and tell stories is video and audio. And B, I wanted to make it easy so more people could do it. And that's why we created VEED. Now, how does it influence my hiring and leadership style? This used to be a value. It's not anymore a company value. It's TLDR. Like, I don't want walls of text. Get to the point. Let's just get this done. Right. And I think, I was talking to my leadership team and we were saying, hey, we should start writing like monthly memos and trying to put our thinking down. And they were like, well, we could do, but actually our company's actually a bit more chatty. Like, we're more live and bounce ideas off. So look, I think the culture and probably the people that I've hired are all kind of, unfortunately, reflections on myself in a way, right? And people that I can work well with, and bless them. A lot of my leadership team also just trying to find ways to work with me, because I'm sure I'm a pain in the ass. So shout out to them.
Now, we're already almost at the end, but I want to ask you one final question. And it brings me back to the very beginning, where you were, through your words and in between lines, also talking a little bit about the hard part of going through this first 2, 3, 4 years, especially when nobody believed in you, when you didn't have the numbers, where you didn't have the shiny office and everyone was clear about that this was always a success case, which every time is the case. When something great happens, everyone knew it from the beginning, but they're not there when you're actually asking for money. So what is one thing you wish you had known when you were younger? What is really maybe even something now that you're older that you wish you would approach or get feedback on or get help for?
This is a really tough question, because I'm obviously very grateful for where I am now, and I'm very lucky to have the job that I do and the company that I love. And I struggled my way there, right? But I think there's an element of like, trust the process, right? And one of our incredible sales leaders, Matt, always says to his team, he says, you can control the inputs, but you can't control the outputs, right? And so like, as long as you're controlling the input, Sabba, as a founder trying to build this company, as long as you're putting the work in, putting the time in, doing the right things, the outputs will come. I think that we can get a bit nervous and anxious that we're not as successful as we want to be yet. But I think we need to focus on the inputs and less of getting obsessed with the out,
I really love this answer, and especially because it ties to an upcoming episode where we will talk about the stoicism, because this is actually what the Stoic philosophers say, that you basically can only control certain things and others not. So concentrate on those things that you can concentrate on, and the rest is you can anyways not do anything about it. So why worry about it? Thank you so much, Sabba, for coming on our show, for taking the time. We know we're all super busy, so we appreciate it even more. Where can people find you and learn more about your story, about your product, about anything that is upcoming in the next couple of months and years?
Sure. So the best place to get the most unfiltered content that doesn't go through my marketing team is Twitter and X, right? If it's on LinkedIn, it's been groomed by them. So if you want to know the real me, it's going to be there. If you want to hear the company updates, LinkedIn's probably the best place.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And
Thank you
talk
very
to you
much.
soon.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
And this was another episode of our Follow the Gradient podcast.
And now we would love to hear from you. How did you like it? What should we improve? Do you have any suggestions, ideas, or dream podcast guests? Please let us know.
Thank you and see you again next week.